Ready to talk habits. Today we're doing a deep dive on Atomic Habits by James Clear. So I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Sounds good.
And I know habits doesn't exactly sound like the most riveting topic, but trust me, on this deep dive, it's got some really surprising insights right out of the gate.
Okay.
We're hit with this concept of if you get 1% better at something every single day,
Yeah.
you're going to be almost 38 times better after a year.
It's true. That's the principle of compounding, right?
Right.
Those small, consistent efforts just build on themselves over time.
I know. Isn't that wild? And it made me think of that example.
Oh, yeah.
If you adjust a plane's trajectory, just a tiny bit,
Mm-hmm.
only 3 degrees,
Yeah.
it might not seem like a big deal at first, right?
Right.
But over a long flight,
Yeah.
totally different destination.
Completely different country. Yeah. It's a good analogy
Mhm.
because, Clear uses that to show how these small, seemingly insignificant daily choices that we make, they can have a massive impact on where we end up in life.
Okay, so that's inspiring and intimidating at the same time.
Right.
Because it's wow, my tiny choices make a big difference.
They do.
But then it also makes me wonder, if these small changes are so important,
Yeah.
is it even worth it to set these big, hairy, audacious goals? Maybe that's not even the point.
That's a great question. And that's where, James Clear's whole emphasis on systems comes in, right?
Yeah.
He argues that it's not about, chasing some distant finish line or, this big, kind of goal. It's more about the system that you create for making progress.
So it's less about I'm going to run a marathon and more about I'm the kind of person who runs regularly.
Precisely. And,
Yeah.
and in fact, the book even points out that many unsuccessful people set goals, but it's the system, the process that truly sets successful people apart. It's about shifting your identity.
I like that.
Yeah, not just checking off a box.
So how do we get out of that trap then? Because it's so easy to rely on motivation or these bursts of willpower, but we know that that's not going to last.
It's not sustainable. Right. Think about it. You don't rely on motivation to brush your teeth every day, right?
Yeah.
It's just ingrained as a habit, part of a system.
That's true.
You just do it.
I never thought of it like that.
So he's arguing, James Clear, is that we can kind of apply that same principle to other areas of our lives as well.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I'm definitely starting to see how if you focus on that system,
Yeah.
those small repeatable actions,
Right.
that can really lead to big changes over time, right?
Absolutely.
But okay, so how do we actually build those systems in the first place? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's where this idea of atomic habits comes in,
Mhm.
which is, kind of the cornerstone of his whole book.
And so just like atoms are the building blocks of matter, right? Atomic habits are those tiny changes that form the foundation of, really remarkable results.
So instead of doing a huge overhaul of your entire life,
Yeah, overnight.
you just make these tiny, almost, you don't even notice them,
Right, exactly.
improvements every day.
Small incremental changes.
And that's how you actually make progress.
Yeah, think of it like building a wall, right? One brick at a time. Each brick might seem insignificant on its own, but eventually they all add up to something pretty substantial.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm a visual learner, so I like that.
Yeah, good analogy.
A habit scorecard.
Yes.
I don't really know what that is.
Yeah, so that's a tool that Clear recommends, basically just to become more aware of your current habits,
Okay.
both good and bad, you
Right.
know?
Okay.
So the idea is to take inventory of your daily actions.
And kind of identify any habits that might be hindering your progress or, maybe reinforcing some negative patterns in your life.
So you're basically taking a look at what you're already doing.
Yeah, it's like holding up a mirror to your daily routine.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any one thing that's super useful on that habit scorecard or?
Yeah, so, one thing that he recommends is labeling each habit as, is this positive, negative, or neutral? And this can be really helpful.
And you just do that for yourself. You decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's, he has some guidelines, but yeah, basically just what is this habit doing for me?
Gotcha.
Is it helping me move towards my goals or is it, kind of holding me back?
So just that simple act of thinking about it
That's right.
and deciding if it's positive, negative, or neutral.
Can be incredibly illuminating. Yeah, it helps you kind of pinpoint those areas where you might want to focus your energy.
Okay. That's super helpful. But I'm curious. So, okay, we've identified the habits.
Yeah.
But how do we actually start changing them?
Right.
Because, there's that saying habits are hard to break.
They are. But they're also, difficult to form, especially good ones.
Yeah.
So, you got to be patient. But Um, he kind of breaks down this habit formation process into what he calls the habit loop. Have you heard of that
A
before?
habit loop. No, but it sounds intriguing.
It is. It's a very helpful kind of framework
Okay.
for understanding how habits work.
Tell me more.
So it basically consists of 4 stages.
Oh.
There's the cue, the craving, the response, and then the reward.
Okay.
And so cue is basically like the trigger
Okay.
that tells your brain to initiate a behavior.
Okay.
Then you've got the craving,
Okay.
which is really just the motivational force
Got it.
behind the habit.
Right.
Then the response, that's the actual habit that you perform,
Okay.
wherever that may be. And then finally, the reward, which is that satisfying outcome that then reinforces the habit loop.
So it makes you want to keep doing it.
It makes you want to keep doing it. Exactly.
Okay, I think I get the gist, but could you maybe give a specific example?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say your habit is, checking your phone first thing in the morning.
Okay, relatable.
Yeah, pretty common one.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So the cue might be, your phone buzzing on the nightstand
Okay.
or, just seeing it there, even if it's not buzzing.
Right.
The craving is that,
To that urge to
that urge to see what you've missed, like any messages, notifications, news, what's going on in the world.
right, that FOMO.
Exactly, exactly. The response, of course, is you picking up your phone and you're checking those apps.
Makes sense.
And the reward is that hit of dopamine
Okay.
you get from seeing those notifications, feeling connected, feeling like you're in the loop.
So you're saying our brain is basically just chasing those rewards.
Yeah, it's wired that way.
Those little dopamine hits.
Absolutely. And it keeps us coming back for more.
Even if it's a bad habit.
Even if it's a bad habit. Exactly. That's the thing about habits. They don't discriminate.
Mhm.
That's just how they work.
Interesting.
But the good news is understanding this loop allows us to start making changes, right? Because if we know how the loop works, we can kind of game the system.
Okay, so then how do we actually apply that knowledge, right? How do we use that to break the bad habits and
Right.
form the good ones?
So that's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in.
Okay.
But, I'm curious,
Yeah.
before we dive into those, what part of this loop, resonates with you the most so far? I'm just curious.
Honestly, it's that craving part, I never thought about it that just even thinking about the reward, that's enough to get that dopamine flowing.
Right. It's such a powerful mechanism.
It's no wonder we fall back into bad habits, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's really at the heart of, Clear's 4 laws of behavior change, right? So remember those 4 stages of the habit loop: cue, craving, response, reward.
Yeah.
Each of these laws basically gives us a strategy to either amplify or disrupt that loop, depending on if you're trying to build a good habit or break a bad one. So,
Okay, so where do we even begin? Give me the step one.
all right. So step 1, Clear's first law. Make it obvious, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of touched on this before with that whole priming your environment thing, right? So for example, if you're trying to read more, you don't want to hide your book away in a drawer,
Right.
Put it on your pillow.
Yeah, you make it impossible to miss.
Exactly. You're removing those barriers to action.
So if I want to meditate every morning,
Yeah.
I'd put a meditation cushion right next to my bed.
There you go. The more visible, the more accessible it is, that cue, the more likely you are to actually do the thing, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about craving, though? How do you make those positive habits, more attractive?
Right.
Especially when, you've got all these temptations around you that are instant gratification. I mean, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but that's where Clear's second law comes in.
Hmm.
Make it attractive.
Okay.
And we talked about temptation bundling.
Right.
But it's also about reframing how you think about the habit itself,
Yeah. Okay, so what does that mean? Give me an example.
Sure. So instead of, dreading your workout, right? Focus on how energized and accomplished you're going to feel after.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Or if you're trying to eat healthier,
Yeah.
Focus on the delicious flavors, the textures of those meals.
Yeah.
Not just oh, this is healthy for me.
Right.
know? So it's about shifting your perspective from obligation to enjoyment.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we make it obvious, we make it attractive.
Okay, you got it. So what's next?
What's next? What's the next step?
Got to make it easy.
Make it easy.
That's Clear's third law. And this is where the 2-minute rule comes in.
Right. Yeah, he talked about that.
Yeah, so break it down.
Okay.
Tiny little step. Something you could do in 2 minutes or less.
So instead of I'm going to write a whole chapter,
Yeah.
it's I'm going to write one sentence.
Exactly. It's got to get started.
Okay.
And that momentum builds on itself.
That's a really good strategy because it just takes the pressure off.
Right,
It makes
exactly.
it seem less daunting.
And then finally, once you've done those things, we got to make it satisfying.
Okay, yeah.
That's Clear's fourth law.
Because our brains love those rewards.
They do. They love those
It-
rewards. And we talked about how dopamine, right, it gets released in anticipation of the reward, but then you also get that spike after you've received the reward.
Right.
So it's about creating this positive feedback loop that just strengthens that behavior.
So how do we actually, like, what are some ways that we can make our habits more satisfying?
Yeah, so, habit trackers, those can be super effective. The simple act of, you know, checking off a box,
Yeah, yeah.
marking a calendar, like that can give you a sense of accomplishment.
Totally.
And that motivates you to keep going.
I've even heard of people using those like visual trackers where it's like you fill a jar with marbles for every day.
Absolutely. Visualizing your progress can be super powerful.
I like that.
And don't underestimate like the power of celebration too.
Right. Yeah.
Celebrate those wins no matter how small.
Little wins.
Little wins, exactly.
I'm getting the sense that like this whole thing about building better habits, it's really about like understanding how your brain works.
It is. It's about understanding your brain.
And then like designing your environment and your routines to like
Yeah, to support you.
support you in doing what you want to do.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
And remember, it's a journey. It's not like a race or anything like that.
Yeah.
There will be setbacks along the way. But the key is to view those as like learning opportunities,
Not as failures.
not as failures.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah,
I feel like this whole deep dive has been so eye-opening, but
Good.
if you had to like leave our listeners with like just one thought to ponder,
Okay.
like what would it be?
All right, think about this. If our habits really do shape our identity, right?
Okay.
What's one small change you could make today to start becoming the person you want to be?
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
thanks.
Well, on that note, I think that wraps up our deep dive on atomic habits.
I agree.
It's time to put all these awesome insights into action.
Let's do it.
I hope you all enjoyed this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning and keep growing.